Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast. My name is Chris Hatfield, coming to you from Sox Prospects Mid-Atlantic offices here in our nation's capital. We're back. Spring training has begun. The Red Sox are playing games in Major League Camp. The Sox Prospects staff trip to the fort is booked. It's an exciting time, and we are excited to be back. Thank you for joining us. I'm joined by my co-host, Sox Prospects Director of Scouting, Ian Kundle, and Managing Editor, Matt Hegel. Gentlemen, welcome back. It's been a while.
Hey, Chris and Ian. Good to be back on.
Hi, guys. It's good to get out of hibernation with winter over and finally ramping things back up and getting ready for the season.
Yeah, I in the meantime have gotten some questions on Twitter from asking people asking where the podcast has been, and frankly, a couple of reasons. First off, it's been kind of a busy time for me at work. That's hopefully about to ease up a little bit in the coming couple of weeks, although it's going to be a sprint to the finish. And frankly, not a lot was happening. I personally don't like recording episodes of the podcast just to record episodes of the podcast. We had a couple guests we were talking to and couldn't really coordinate with, but I don't like recording a podcast just so you can hear us BSing about nothing, about meaningless minor league free agent signings and things like that. But that said, we're back into this. We've got a few ideas of guests we want to have on about news happening both on and off the field. I just thought of one that I hadn't even talked to these guys about yet, but we are back, and hopefully better than ever. Who knows? A couple of notes. First, we want to give a podcast welcome to Joe Tetrault, who is one of our new staff members at the site. He is a web editor and is going to be the podcast producer. He's going to be taking the reins on the editing and producing of the podcast going forward, which should be a huge help. Honestly, a lot of the reason that kind of I hate to put it this way, but my presence on the podcast is necessary, one, because I'm the one who records it on my computer, and two, because I'm the one who has been producing it, which involves fixing any of the mistakes, which I'm actually going to have to be a lot more diligent about writing down because I can't just listen to the podcast back and find them. I need to be able to tell Joe where he needs to fix things. But so it's going to be a huge help having him around to take that from me. Basically, that's another hour plus, frankly. And there's the first thing I'm going to have to tell him to fix. I should have gotten some water. Anyway. But we're going to be able to tell Joe where mistakes are that he can fix. He'll be doing all the production, uploading, things like that. That's going to take about an hour and a half off of my plate in terms of putting the podcast together. So that's going to be a huge help. So welcome to Joe. Should also mention, I guess, the other new hires at the site. So we want to welcome our new social media specialist, John Lyons Harrison, who I had the chance to meet actually at the winter meetings. Great guy. Joe, in addition to Joe as a web editor, we have Allison Gagne joining the site as a web editor. I don't believe any relation to Eric Gagne, hopefully, but who knows. And actually, Eric Gagne pitching in the World Baseball Classic, gentlemen. I don't know if you saw that. That's going to be hilarious. And finally, Steve Guglielmo is our new digital editor, who'll be doing things like stat updates, social media, and web editing as well, kind of a jack of all trades for some of the positions we were looking to fill. So welcome to those four. Welcome to the staff. If anyone out there wants to join the staff, keep an eye on our news page, especially in kind of the fall is when we post our help wanted ads, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, we get notes from people during the year who want to join the site. If you feel like you can contribute something, drop us a line, but that's sort of when we post our job postings is in the fall after the season ends. As always, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. We're up on YouTube. Links to all of those outlets are in the post for this episode at news.soxprospects.com. Thanks, as always, to the Ludlow Thieves for our intro music. The song is called All the Money. You can find their stuff on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, etc. Also, we're going to be hitting some listener questions today. Since we're firing back up again, you can start sending those again to podcast@soxprospects.com. We try and get to all of those. And finally, I wanted to give a heads up to everyone out there is that we're going to be starting, I believe it's called a Patreon. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it's Patreon. What that is... Patreon, thank you. What that is it's a way for those of you out there who want to support the podcast to be able to support the podcast, and if you're so inclined. And basically what it is we do this for free, and we want to keep it free. It will continue to be free as long as we're able to do that. But we want to give some perks to those who support the show. So I don't really want to give too much of a preview, give things away, especially if we don't wind up doing some of the ones we're planning on right now. But for example, one thing we're talking about is that giving at a certain level, your email questions will jump the line, so to speak, and you will be able to definitely have your questions heard on that next episode, because sometimes we get more questions than we can handle in a given episode. So things like that, we'll be rolling that out in the next few weeks, I believe. So keep your ears open here on the podcast for that, and your eyes on news.soxprospects.com.
Yeah, Chris, I was just going to add in quickly.
Sure.
The idea is that you give $1 or $2 or perhaps $5 per episode, and then you get a perk based on that. So
right.
I just wanted to mention the mechanism of it.
Right, yeah, sure. And like I said, we'll have the full details on that coming soon, how it works. I know mostly how it works, but I definitely don't consider myself an expert on it yet. So, but like I said, we'll be rolling that out soon, so keep your eyes and ears open for that. But without further ado, we have a lot to catch up on, but also not a lot to catch up on. Our last episode was in December, early December, frankly, dealing with the fallout of the Chris Sale and Tyler Thornburg trades. But since then, not a ton has happened. But it's ranking season, I guess. We're coming out of that, so maybe that should be our first topic. And it's kind of funny, guys. Recently, I did a radio spot, and one of the first questions that I was asked by our friends Ken Kale and Bob Lipman up in New Hampshire, and one of the first things they asked about was where the Red Sox top prospects are going to be to start the season. And my smart-ass answer was in the San Diego Padres and Chicago White Sox systems. But it's certainly a unique, in terms of historically, ranking season and outlook for the system entering the 2017 season, or at least I think, where there definitely is the talent near the top that's been as good as we've seen in a while. Maybe the top headline here is that Andrew Benintendi has emerged as probably the consensus top prospect in baseball, which makes some sense when you consider that were it not for the ankle injury he suffered during the season last year while he was in Boston, he would have graduated already. He would not be a prospect anymore. And so it makes sense, given the showing he had both in the minors and in the majors last year, that he's the consensus top prospect in baseball. Kind of like, reminds me a lot really of Corey Seager last year, frankly, where it's just kind of this sure thing who's very close to graduating, who is a top-flight prospect. But there certainly is a lot we could digest there. So I guess, starting with you, Ian, what's your sort of top-level view of what we're seeing in the rankings this offseason when you look at ours as compared to outlets like MLB.com, Baseball America, Keith Law at ESPN?
I think when you look at it, the first thing, as you said, is that the top three, it's pretty – I think every list actually had the same top 3 to 4 guys.
I think 4.
But I think it's 4. I think everyone had Travis 4. But after that, it kind of gets murky. And after that top 3, for the most part, you're looking – those are the only really consensus top 100 guys. And all of them, though, happen to be, I think, consensus top 50 guys.
Yeah, which surprised me. I thought Groom was going to be more of a top 75 guy, personally, given the off-field stuff. But it's kind of funny how the farther we get away from that, the more people are forgetting it.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing. I think also, too, that it helped that he did get up to Lowell last year. Mm-hmm. And so people got eyes on him more than, some of the draftees who maybe didn't make it out of complex ball. So I think that his performance last year, where he showed already kind of the traits that we'd seen coming out of that made him so highly regarded coming out of high school, helped. But then I think, again, so you got that top 4 or 5, and I think Bobby Dahlbeck is in almost all the lists was in the top 5 around there, or 5 or 6 range.
So let's just actually say it. The top 3 has been Andrew Benintendi, Rafael Devers, Jason Groom. Sam Travis has been number 4, and 5 is where you start to have differences. For Dahlbeck, we've got him at 5. Baseball America's got him at 5. MLB.com has him at 5. Keith Law's got him at 7, behind Travis Lakins and Roniel Raudes, actually, which I found surprising, especially on Lakins, but we could talk about that. For what a Baseball Prospectus' list is kind of tough because it came out before the trades, so their quote number 5 is Brian Johnson, who was actually number 9, for what it's worth. But at any rate, that's Dahlbeck, so go ahead, Ian. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, but so you have like similar names in that 5 to 10 range for the most part, but then after that, I just think it kind of turns into a crapshoot.
It really does.
We were kind of talking about it before the recording, but you can make the case for guys that are like 15 could be as low as 30, 35, and there's guys in the 30 to 35, even down in the 40s that you could argue could be 25, 30, because they just all these trades have done, and I think it was something like. Because Margot, I know, is in like the top 25. Moncada and Kopech are both in the top 25. Espinosa's in the top 25. When you're losing, 5, 6 consensus or top 100 prospects, the depth in the system takes such a big hit. And I think at the top, while it still is very strong with Benintendi, Devers, and Groom, the depth itself is just not there anymore. And there really needs some second-level guys to take big steps forward this year, or we're going to start noticing in a few years the thinning out, and it's going to be precipitous, the fall off, especially as Benintendi's going to graduate this year. Travis is going to graduate this year most likely, and I wouldn't be shocked if Devers at some point makes it to the big leagues this year. Next year's list could be pretty troubling, we'll say. Looking ahead.
With a late first round pick. International guys are great, but international guys should not be entering your top 10, even if they're top-level international guys, except for the tippy top of guys in a good year.
Well, you look at like this year, I think I think his name's Kevin Maitan. He was the big international guy the Braves signed, and he was considered one of the top international prospects in the last couple of years, up there on like the Miguel Sano level. And he barely made the top. Granted, the Brave system is loaded, but I think he wasn't a consensus top 100 prospect, and he's just around the 10 spot in their system.
Yeah, Baseball America has him at 7 in that system.
So he's in the low end, and that's like the top echelon type of prospect. That's not like the guy you're signing for $1.5 million who's just, some shortstop who has intriguing tools who's 15 or 16. That's like the high end, once every couple of year type. So yeah, they're not going to get any sort of immediate impact or anything from those type of guys. So it's going to be a slow rebuild. We'll see what happens.
Right. Matt, how about you? What the kind of a top level stands out? Is there anything different than what Ian was kind of talking about, and if there's anything specific you wanted to delve into, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for the most part. Like, it's not. It's still a decent system when you look at it. Like you guys were saying. I mean, when I look back at 2012. Will Middlebrooks, Matt Barnes, Anthony Renato, Xander Bogaerts by the end of the year was the top prospect. But those are some of the top guys. And, as far as the precipitous fall-off thing, I think a lot of things can change. Guys can emerge. Someone who's a middling prospect can skyrocket, or they can draft a guy like Mookie Betts who skyrockets through the system. So, I mean, I think a lot can change as far as, being too worried about a drop-off in the prospects going forward. I think, like you guys mentioned on another point, I think it's interesting that the guys you see on some of these lists who are just like, in the 50s on our, like Yi-Sen Koka. I know Ian, I think at Instructs, liked what he saw a little bit out of him, but he, more of a long-range guy who maybe had some tools. I think, Ian thought he was a little bit small at the time and that sort of thing. Sometimes those guys go somewhere. Sometimes they're just sort of athletic guys who, are the last guy included in a trade type thing. But, Yi-Sen Koka is 25, Lorenzo Cedrola 24 on Baseball America list. And those are guys, I think, in our 40 to 60 range. So it's quite a discrepancy once you get past, even the teens, basically. So,
Yeah, if you look at Jim Callis's list, I should say MLB.com's list, but I think Jim's usually the one that puts it together. I mean, Lorenzo Cedrola is number 16 on his list.
Well, yeah, wow. And I think part of that is, though, that when you look at the system, you get down past, and I think we talked about on the last show, the entire system from like 25 to 45 is relievers. And at some point, it's just like, would I rather have a reliever or take a shot on, a 16, 17, 18-year-old who's never played out of complex ball but has flashed a couple intriguing tools? And that's the dilemma. And I think it's a little, when you have only 30 spots that you're ranking, it's more, I feel like you have more of the ability to go out on a limb, and especially if you're only updating it like once a year, take a shot on a guy who might do something, show more, get stronger, and show more ability. And they're more likely to do that than play the safe option and take like the floor guys, the guys who they're not going to be anything special, but there's a 6th inning reliever in there, or there's a 7th inning reliever in there.
Yeah, and it's it's the other thing that I've kind of been noticing is I'll look at a list and I'll see a guy like, I'll be surprised that, for example, Keith Law has Travis Lakins at number 5 on his list, and I'll say to myself, wow, that's pretty high. And then I'll look at the Baseball America handbook where Lakins is number 13, and I'll see MLB.com has Lakins at they have him up at 8, and I'll just say, wow, like that's so much different than where we have him. But the system's so thin that Lakins is 17 on our list, and I'm not even realizing it. It's kind of surprising in that sense that we have guys who we've got a 4 projection on in the top 10. It's really striking, and it just goes to show, I think, although a lot of the names are the same, I think looking at all these lists this morning, kind of preparing, and last night, that kind of next tier after the top 5 consists of, in some order, Brian Johnson, Marco Hernandez, if you're ranking him, because at some outlets they're considering him graduated based on service time, C.J. Chatham, Josh Ockamy, Roniel Raudes, and then some folks have Travis Lakins up in that group, and then kind of after that you've got Michael Chavis, Nick Longy, and then it turns into all the relievers, and kind of the young Latin American prospects that the team has. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out, who moves up. The depth is just not there, I think, in position prospects at all. If you look at it, looking at the depth chart that we run on the site, it's striking how usually you just see some interesting guys in center field and shortstop. And you look at center field right now, and it's just, after Jackie Bradley, you're looking at guys like Yohan Ibar, Lorenzo Cedrola, Joseph Monje. At shortstop, it's Bogarts in the majors, and then nothing other than C.J. Chatham, basically. Jeremy Rivera is nice in terms of he can pick it, but then that's why you get guys like Eason Coca after playing in the DSL showing up, based on what they did down there and what they showed at Instructs. There's just not a lot of depth in terms of hitters. And I think that's going to sneak up on them once, it's great for right now while you've got Bogarts, Betts, Bradley, Benintendi under contract. But, if they're going to rely on a guy after Sam Travis, there's just not a lot there for me other than Devers in the minors to come up and fill a role in the majors other than a bench spot for at least 2 years, maybe 3. So I don't know. It's very striking to me to just see the lack of depth and how it's showing up on these lists.
Yeah, I think it's true, definitely, that there's a lack of depth. It's interesting, though, when you look at the top, 12, I think there's only 3 pitchers in there. So I think that's pretty more position heavy than usual. But yeah, the depth's not there, and there's definitely a gap between, like you said, Travis and then Devers, Benintendi, and then who's the next guy up?
Dahlbeck, I guess.
Yeah, or
and that's
Longy,
if they rush him
maybe?
to Salem. Yeah, I guess Longy, but you've
Who
got
knows? Yeah.
in terms of kind of sure-ish things or guys you can project for a starting role in the majors at this point. The other thing I guess we should mention, and a question I have for you guys, is say Ben Cherington doesn't get fired and does his best Ben Cherington impression and doesn't trade anybody in the past 2 years. And you're looking at a system that still includes looking at Baseball America's list. In addition to number 1 overall prospect Andrew Benintendi, you have number 2 prospect Yohan Moncada. Okay, you've got Rafael Devers at 18. You've got Anderson Espinoza at 21. Manuel Margot at 24. Michael Kopech at 32. And then Jason Groom at 43, all in the top 50. Is this the best farm system this club has ever had?
Yeah, I think it, and then it's not even close, right?
I think it has to be.
I think so.
That's how many in the top 50 did I just say? 7?
And it's not just that it's 7, back end top 50 guys. You've got 3 or 4 elite prospects in addition,
2.
and then But I would consider Devers in that same like category though. And then you've got the elite guys, then you have the depth, and you have some position versatility. You know, you've got outfielders, you've got infielders, you've got left-handed pitcher, you got a right-handed pitcher. You just like they covered all that would have had, you know, all avenues were covered with that list right there.
Yeah, and I mean it's not just BA's list. Just going really quick down MLB's list: Benintendi 1, Moncada 2. Okay, and then you jump down. They actually have Kopech at 16, which I think is really aggressive. Devers at 17. Manuel Margot at 23. Anderson Espinoza at 25. So that's, 6 of the top 25, did I just say? Jason Groom at 41. It's actually kind of striking how similar this list is to Baseball America's list. And I think,
well, if ESPN's even more. ESPN has 7 in the top 25 because Benintendi's 1. Then Kopech is 7. Devers is 11. Moncada is 17. Groom's 20. Espinosa's 21. Margot's 24.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So,
that's just insane.
That's a lot of top 25 prospects right there.
Yeah. But then again, you could also argue that that's wasteful, right? I mean, you don't need that
you don't
many
have
prospects.
room for all those guys.
When you're competing, you don't. I mean, that's the thing. You know, go get Chris Sale with that. That's why when they made the Chris Sale trade, I didn't mind what they gave up.
No, we talked about it. Like, I mean, I think people sometimes say why would you give their prospects? They're not sure things. All you guys want to do is just save all of them. I think we came on here after the Chris Sale trade and said, yeah, that was fine.
Yeah.
I mean, they kept Devers, who's clearly they've earmarked as a third baseman of the future.
Yep.
They kept Benintendi, who's going to be a starting outfielder this year, and they kept Jason Groom, who looks like their top pitch or is the top pitching prospect now.
Well, let's just say they kept Jason Groom, who's one of the 3 of Groom, Espinoza, and Kopech. I don't think it necessarily had to be Groom for any particular reason.
You're right. But yeah, they kept one of the big 3 pitchers. I mean, that was fine what they gave up there, and I don't think we had any issue with that. And I think it's more going back, like the only deal that really, I mean, they overpaid in the Kimbrel deal. I think we all agree on that, but that is what it is. They didn't give up anything. Like Margot wasn't going to play here. The outfield's full right now, and he's big league ready.
Right.
And then the other guys, I mean, like Javier Guerrero, I didn't think could hit at the time, and he didn't hit last year. I still think there's a chance he's a big leaguer because of his glove, but that's besides the point. But I think the only one still that I go back to is the Pomerantz Espinosa deal. That's the one that bothers me the most because, well, not even knowing now after the fact that Pomerantz was damaged goods, but even at the time, it just seemed like such an overpay and such a short-sighted move. And still, I mean, Pomerantz isn't even a guarantee to be in the rotation this year.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. You traded a top 25 prospect in the game for a guy who might be your longer reliever in 2 months.
And that's just, and there were just so many red flags at the time, and they were and that was before the medical stuff was known, and then the medical stuff after the fact, and it just, that one just, I didn't get it at the time, and I still don't.
And I've said this, is that even if, I agree with you, what you said about the Kimbrel deal, but the fact that that's an overpay, the reason it matters that you overpaid is that wouldn't it have been nice to have Manny Margot at the trade deadline this year to trade for Drew Pomerantz? You know what I mean? And that's also an overpay. But then you still have Espinoza. It's and that's what we said at the time of the Kimbrel deal. It's like the reason overpays matter is because even if it turns out that Guerra falls off, right, which he did, Carlos Asuaje came up. Yeah,
and Logan Allen had a good year at low A, too.
He had a fine year. I mean, Logan Allen, I would say, probably held steady. He didn't make the jump we thought he could make, but he also didn't fall off.
No, I think he had like a close to 3 ERA. But he didn't. But even him, like you take Logan Allen in the system right now, Logan Allen's probably the number 6 prospect, number 7 prospect.
Well, looking at the list as it stands right now, I put him ahead of Brian Johnson. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I would do too. Yes. So I probably have him at 6. So that was, and he was probably like a throw-in in that deal, more or less.
Well, he was the 3rd guy. Yeah.
So that's debatable. He was the 4th guy. They like to sway a lot.
Who was the 4th?
Logan Allen.
Oh, well, no, he was the 3rd guy, and Asuaje was definitely the 4th guy by a lot. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But anyway, like even if you take like him out and you put him back in the system right now, given where it is now, like back at the time, it was like, that's fine. He was like the number, I think he was probably in the teens. And, at the time it's like, oh, that's fine. You traded 4 guys who were about top 20. But now, slowly but surely, with each of these big package deals where you gave up 4 guys there, 4 guys to Chicago, 3 guys to Milwaukee, another guy to San Diego, that's where the depth is all gone. It's being distributed to other teams.
Well, using Baseball America's ratings, right? And I mean, this probably squares with what I would do. Carlos Asuaje is a top 10 prospect in the system as well right now.
Oh, for sure.
He's probably the number C. I'd probably slot him in ahead of Marco Hernandez, or at least
he's right around Marco. He's very similar to Marco Hernandez for me. Yeah,
that's the thing, and it's like, did you need? Yeah, Asuaje's a throw in, and you could say, well, Guerra fell off. Well, yeah, but then some of the other guys came up. So you're still giving up the same amount of value for a guy when you probably could have taken one of those players out, or at least gotten something else back. So we're rehashing things we've already talked about on here, so we'll move on. But
I will say though, could we moving on to what's in the system now?
Yep.
It really makes spring training this year very interesting for me, because not only do I want to see who the guys they're giving the playing time to, like which guys are starting the games. Who's getting the most at bats, where they're playing. But it's also the system is so open that if a guy takes a step forward, it's going to be very noticeable this year. Yep. In the past, that might have fallen under the rug, or you're so focused on the top guys. This year, none of those guys. I mean, Benintendi's obviously going to be with the big club. Devers will probably be with the big club still. Travis is going to be with the big club, as you alluded to.
End of the year, you're saying?
No, I'm talking about during spring training though.
I think Devers will be down by the time we get there.
Bogarts won't be there, though, so they'll need an infielder.
Well, yeah, but that's why you have Rutledge and Hernandez. And
I guess so, yeah.
Then you shortstop more than third base.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Devers might be, but for the most part, it's just going to be going to be a lot of guys, looking to make a mark. And for his past years, there's that top-end talent that everyone's going to be focused on. Now it's such a crapshoot that it's who's going to stand out, and that's kind of intriguing to me.
I do have to say, I guess Devers, if he's down, will be with Pawtucket, just based on he'll be still playing above level above where he'll be, but otherwise, that Pawtucket roster might be rough. That's not going to be must see TV. I don't think.
Dombrowski kept openly saying, I've been trying to get guys, they just don't want to sign here because they don't think they'll have the opportunity.
Well, I mean, he's not wrong though.
Right.
They need guys, and they can't get them because they see the big league. The big league roster is pretty much set, and then at the key positions, they have a backup already. You've got Travis at first base, you got Hernandez for the middle infield, and you got Swihart for catcher. And out, I guess the only position would be outfield, maybe. But they've got Chris Young as their fourth outfielder already, so it's like
Brock Holt is the fifth technically.
Yeah, and so if I'm an agent of one of those priority minor league free agents that teams target, where's the playing time coming from?
Right.
There's no would you rather sign here, or would you sign with Kansas City or San Diego or someone who has 5 or 6 open roster spots at the end?
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, well, let's see. Moving along a little bit here, it's been 2 months, so there have been a number of off-season moves, and I guess maybe the way we'll do this is I'll go through all the other off-season moves that have happened since we recorded. And I realized that we didn't record anything after the Rule 5 draft, probably because nothing important happened. Or maybe did we talk during the Rule 5 draft? I don't think we did. The Red Sox lost a couple guys, but
yeah, we didn't.
Yeah, because we hopped right on after the day of trading on December 6th. So 2 days later was the Rule 5 draft. And I guess what I'll do, guys, is we'll go really quick. Tell me if it's significant or not. And if it's significant, we'll talk about it a little bit. But on December 8th was the Rule 5 draft. The Red Sox selected Josh Rutledge in the Major League phase. I think we can agree that's not even really within our purview. He's competing to be the backup infielder.
I just like that he was on the roster at the end of the season,
I know.
And they had to reselect him in the Rule 5 draft. That was entertaining.
Well, because the reason, and what he said is the reason he didn't sign with them, to prove your point, was because the opportunity didn't appear to be there to be on the Major League roster. And then they went and got him and can only keep him on the Major League roster.
Well, I think part of it also was Travis Shaw was still there. And,
right.
Maybe someone else that I'm not thinking of. But I think he made that point also when he was saying that quote.
I think Shaw was the big one he meant. Well, that if he didn't mention it, it was mentioned.
Yeah. Because that was right after the Shaw trade was 2 days earlier.
Right. So actually, you could say it's probably a direct result of the Shaw trade.
Yeah.
And then in the minor league phase, the Red Sox selected Harrison Cooney from the Angels, who's going to be rehabbing from Tommy John, and Josh Smith from the Pirates, who's basically a young pitcher who has issues with control of the throwing variety, not of the temper variety. And that day, the Red Sox also signed Mitch Moreland and DFA'd Williams Jerez. The Red Sox lost Justin Haley, who was selected by the Angels and then traded twice to the Padres and then finally to the Minnesota Twins. And the Baltimore Orioles selected outfielder Nuri Tavares. I think we kind of pegged that those were the two guys who are most likely to be picked. Anything there significant, Matt?
I guess Haley was a decent prospect. He had a good year last year, and I think he's. I don't know. I would guess coming back. I know Minnesota held Ryan Presley, who they picked from the Red Sox a few years ago, in a situation somewhat similar where I didn't think. Actually, he had even less experience. I didn't think they'd be able to hold him, and they did. So maybe they'll make an effort to hold Haley. I don't know that he's that kind of prospect that is worth it, but we'll see. And Nuri Tavares is. I think Baltimore loves their Rule 5s. I think he has a chance to make it on the bench. Probably not a huge loss. But maybe like a fifth outfielder type at the best, probably. So, nothing too significant. Mm-hmm. Williams Jerez getting DFA'd was kind of interesting too.
Cleared,
and he cleared. Didn't get picked up by anyone else. So, with the state of the system, we still kept him somewhat. I think maybe we bumped him down a few spots since then, but he's still, I think, in the top 40. So he's, we'll see if he can bounce back. He had a pretty poor year last year.
I'd say he's probably one of the guys in the top 40 who we wish wasn't in the top 40.
Yeah, probably fair.
Right. Ian, I guess your quick thoughts on the Rule 5 guys.
Yeah, it's not surprising those guys were taken. As you said, those are the two that we had kind of identified as most likely to be selected. And I'm not really surprised at the two teams they ended up with either. As you said, the Twins, it's in Fort Myers. They get along. They've seen Haley a lot. Right. And with the Orioles just love Red Sox prospects. So,
well, the Orioles love. Matt's right. They love their Rule 5. I mean, Duquette. They kept 2 last year, didn't they?
Well, no, but it's not just that. It's that Duquette. If you look at their farm system, that Michael Almanzar's there. They had what was the outfield? They selected Jason Garcia a couple years ago, but they had Ronald Bermudez was there for a while. Whenever the Orioles AAA team comes to Pawtucket, there's usually 3 or 4 ex-Red Sox on the team.
Yeah. It's like Twins Jace in that sense.
It's really interesting. And so, it's I'm not surprised that they took Tavares. As Matt said, he had a really good year last year. He took a big step forward with his plate discipline and his approach, cut down the strikeouts, got on base a little more. And when you've got speed, you can play all the outfield positions and you can make contact. That's a chance as a bench outfielder these days. So. It's not I think there's a chance he sticks, especially as last year they kept around. What was the guy's name? Joey Rickard from Tampa Bay, who has a very similar profile to Tavares.
Well, no, wasn't Gadel the one from Tampa that they kept around?
Joey Rickard was Texas, I think.
Right. Gadel was the guy from who got
I think it's Goodell.
Goodell, sorry.
Yeah. But I think Rickard ended up, I think it was their leadoff hitter and starting center fielder for a good portion of the year. And
then he turned back into a Rule 5 pick.
Yeah, but people only remember the first couple months.
Right. All right, moving along with the transactions. Some that'll probably be quick. I guess what we'll do, jump in if you want to talk about any of these. December 9th, Red Sox signed minor league free agent Junior Lake to a minor league deal. December 12th. Did I say June? December 9th. December 12th, Matt signed minor league free agent Matt Dominguez to a minor league deal, third baseman. December 14th, re-signed Dan Butler to a minor league deal, signed minor league free agent Marcus Walden to a minor league deal, Walden a reliever. Butler obviously a catcher, and I'll mention one that comes later on in the month. It was announced that catcher Jake Romanski was placed on the restricted list for suspension for violating the minor league drug policy. I think it was for amphetamines, correct? Actually, I can just click on his profile because I updated it. For amphetamines. I think the Dan Butler signing was probably a direct response to the Romanski issue. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah. Gives them a backup catcher with familiarity with the pitchers.
I wouldn't be surprised anyway. If they'd sign him, they always want extra catchers, but
that's true.
Makes sense.
December 16th, let's see, avoided arbitration with Brandon Workman, outrighted Williams Jerez after he cleared waivers. We had that. We have some cuts on December 19th. DSL, he was in the DSL last year. Pitcher Nicolo Clemente from Italy. Sad to see him go. Always nice to have a kid from Italy in the system. Released Reed Gragnani, who has since rejoined the organization as a coach. He's going to be a coaching assistant in Salem this year. Released Mike McCarthy, kind of up and down arm in AA and AAA. Released Keel McKickern, A-ball reliever. Released GCL infielder Rafael Olivares. Released low A, or I guess short season A infielder Andy Perez. Released rookie ball reliever Brad Stone and Max Watt. Same thing, rookie ball reliever. That was kind of the initial round of cuts. On December 20th, traded Clay Buchholz to Philadelphia for Josh Tobias. And I think we should mention this really quickly. I think people have kind of forgot about it because I think we've kind of all really digested it. But any reason to think this is anything other than a salary dump? Ian. Or Matt, you're about to jump in. Do it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I kind of tend to think they liked something in Josh Tobias and think maybe there's something there as a guy who, maybe has good hitting ability, but doesn't flash all the tools, doesn't necessarily stand out as a top prospect, but maybe the type of guy who can kind of be under the radar and make it as a bench guy or something like that. I don't know. I tend to think that they at least see something there.
Ian, any thoughts on that, or just?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with Matt. I think they liked something about Tobias, and especially since, as you kind of alluded to earlier, there's a lack of middle infield depth in the system. That he's 24 already, but he's second baseman, and they liked something. So we'll see. You never know. It's worth a flyer. I mean, it's not like Buchholz didn't have a ton of value, especially given his salary. So
right. All right, let's see. I mentioned the Romanski suspension. December 25th signed Brian Bogusevic to a minor league deal. Another AAA outfielder. On December 26th signed old friend Hector Meneses, utility man back from the Twins. He'll be in AA or AAA, and signed minor league free agent infielder Jose Rosario. Again, a lot of nothing. Let's see. Earlier this month, signed the following minor league free agents. Sean Haviland, who was here last year, former Harvard pitcher, AAA rotation depth. Old friend Cesar Cabral, left-handed relief pitcher, AAA. Eric Cordier, who spent last year in Japan and formerly of the Royals, Braves, Pirates, Giants, and Marlins systems. A little bit of Major League experience, but another AAA arm. Tyler Spoon, catcher in the lower minors, also placed on the restricted list after being suspended for amphetamines. Let's see. Mario Alcantara signed elsewhere. That's not us, the Red Sox signing anyone. Let's see. Signed Kyle Kendrick to a minor league deal on January the 18th. Let's see. Claimed Steve Selski off waivers from Cincinnati. He is a first baseman outfielder who does not play center field, who in his first game in spring training played center field. So there's that, I guess. Let's see. On January 27th, signed Cuban pitcher Jorge Fernandez, who is 25, has not pitched in an organized league since 2014, and it's a little strange. I think he'll be competing for a spot in Salem and camp, and I doubt he makes a team, but we'll see. And in February, they've signed minor league free agents Mike Olt, Carlos Quentin, Mitchell Osnowitz, and now purchased the contract of Hector Velasquez, not Victor Velasquez. That'd be really cool. But Hector Velasquez from the Mexican League. Basically, hold on. I guess we should mention really quick. Olt and Quentin, guys. Anything there? Smoke where there's fire there, or nothing going there? Ian.
I think it's interesting. with more Olt than Quinn, because Olt was once highly regarded. I think he was once pretty like a top 30. I want to say maybe even top 30 prospect. And he just had, I think he had an eye issue, I want to say, and just couldn't make contact anymore. And so, I mean, he had big raw power back in the day. I think he was looking at his player page. He had 28 home runs in Double-A in 2012 and got some big league time that year. And so maybe, who knows? Maybe you get him working with a hitting coach who can figure something out and he can turn into a bench bat. You never know. Quentin's like, 34, 35, and hasn't played in the big leagues in 2 years, so I don't think there's much there.
Yeah. With Olt, we should mention... Go ahead.
Yeah, Quinn supposedly lost like 30 pounds or something, so...
Yeah.
I mean, something to keep an eye on. Maybe he's more mobile. We'll see. Not expecting much. And Olt, I don't know if this is what you were going to say, but Olt had a pretty rough year in Double-A last year. So, it's... Yeah, like, you recognize the name when they got him, but looking at that, I'm kind of skeptical, but... I'm not sure. I haven't heard any too much anecdotal stuff about him or why he might be better this year type thing.
I don't think he even got a non-roster invite. I mean, that's kind of says it all right there, frankly. Yeah, he didn't even get an invite to Major League Spring Training. There were people who, when he signed, were all freaking out thinking he was going to compete for a Major League job, but he's not even in Major League camp. So there's nothing there, guys.
And I'll add one thing. Do you know where Mara Alcantara signed?
I noticed that too.
Yeah, of course he signed with Baltimore.
Yep.
Alcantara, I mentioned him because he was also suspended, and so he's going to be suspended for the first 50 games of the year. So
the guy that stands out there, maybe of the guys you mentioned there, is Kyle Kendrick. Is a guy who might actually get major league starts at some point this year if he can have a decent time in AAA, and of course the Brian Bannister effect.
Yep.
We'll see if he can do anything there, but there's already been stories about that.
Yeah, I was going to say the articles are already coming out about how Kyle Kendrick, and I mean to some degree, I think a lot of it is kind of, I don't know, I don't want to take anything away from Bannister, who's supposedly very good, who's clearly very good at his job, but. If he's actually drawing free agents, that's good. I think his effect is maybe being a little oversold a bit here.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
But that said, it's interesting.
In general, anytime any sort of miracle cure, miracle change type thing or guy or workout or anything like that, I'm pretty skeptical until it's proven again and again, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing, actually, Kendrick has an opt-out, right?
I believe so, yeah. He's got an opt-out.
I just thought it was interesting that in past years, there's usually 3 or 4 guys in camp with those opt-outs. But I think that kind of lends back to what we were saying about how that agents just don't see an opportunity with the Red Sox. So it looks like, looking at our page, that Kendrick is the only guy they signed to as an opt-out.
Well, that we know of.
I guess so, yeah.
There are other guys who I'm sure Quentin probably has one.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of times that happens with relievers. Maybe I'm misremembering, but they're so deep at reliever in AAA.
Yeah. They actually have it. It's interesting on our projections. You're right. They have 5 40-man roster guys who are relievers currently. Right. That's a lot
in AAA. Yeah, and then the 3 more that were non-roster invitees.
Yeah,
which is actually, I mean, to
their
have 8
entire
guys,
bullpen.
Their entire projected Pawtucket bullpen is in Major League camp right now.
Plus Carson Smith coming back.
Well, plus 3 guys who are projected for the Double-A bullpen in Taylor, Maddox, and Callahan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They have bullpen depth, especially righties, but
right.
So yeah,
right. Yeah. So that's interesting. Just to round back real quick to the Rule 5 stuff, going to rosterresource.com, they project, and this is not the be-all end-all, but they do project Haley to make the Twins. They do not project Nuri Tavares to make the Orioles, which I think makes sense because the Orioles in the outfield now have, since they traded for Seth Smith, they have Adam Jones, Seth Smith, and Hyun-Soo Kim on the Major League roster starting, and then they re-signed Mark Trumbo to be the DH, I guess, which is a lot better spot for him than when they were playing him in the outfield last year. And they also have Joey Rickard still on the roster, as well as both Ryan Flaherty and Anthony Santander. Who can, in theory, Santander is another Rule 5 guy So basically he's competing with Tavares for what looks like the last bench spot. So
if they get Tavares back, that actually would be useful
because they could use him.
That's like he would be, I would say, after Selsky, probably the next outfield call up of the guys we have projected for the minors, because they're not calling up Castillo because of his contract and yeah.
Well, so the non-roster invite outfielders. So Steve Selsky is an outfielder who's on the 40-man roster who will be in AAA to start the year. And then you've got Rusney Castillo, who's not coming up, as you mentioned. Brian Bogusevic and Alan Craig and Junior Lake are the non-roster invitee outfielders. And you would think if Tavares comes back, unless it's really late in camp, he comes back into Major League camp, I would assume. And he'd probably be starting in AAA, frankly, if he came back.
He's probably the starting right fielder in AAA.
Yeah,
I would say, because I think that's where he played the most. I want to say with Portland, because he's a weird one because he doesn't play center field, or at least didn't last year.
Even though he's got speed.
Even though he has speed, yeah. So.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on from that. Really quick fall winter league recap. Let's see here, guys. The contingent in Arizona was interesting based on three guys who are no longer in the organization, and Yohan Moncada, Michael Kopech, and Mauricio Dubon. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over the Arizona Fall League, and we probably recapped that anyway. I just thought it's interesting that almost half of the contingent that was in Arizona for the Red Sox is now gone. To see big-name prospects who were in winter leagues, I guess the top one is obviously Rafael Devers, who is playing down in the Dominican League. Hit 243, 282, 297 in 74 at-bats for Escogido. Not really worried about that myself because, frankly, he's really young for the Dominican League. The Dominican League is actually pretty good and usually has more of a AAA level type difficulty level. So not too worried about that. Worth noting that probably part of the reason Haley got picked is he shoved down there in 23 innings. His ERA was 0.38, so that was interesting. Roenis Elias threw pretty well down there in 43 innings. He had a 2.27 ERA, 1.31 WHIP, 37 strikeouts to 19 walks. He threw pretty well down there. That's about it. Marco Hernandez hit 286, 304, 421 for Licey. Hanley Ramirez played a little bit at the end to warm up for the World Baseball Classic. But that's about it for the Dominican. Actually, Anori Tavares, if we're going to mention Haley, Tavares actually hit pretty well down there too, hitting 283, 349, 362 with 3 home runs. Should mention Marco Hernandez had 4 home runs, which is interesting. That might be as many as he had all of last year, frankly. Let's see, in Pawtucket he had 5 home runs and 1 more in Boston. So nice to see a little pop out of him. In Venezuela, obviously the big story was Eduardo Rodriguez getting hurt again. Apparently the knee is pretty close to healthy. Is he throwing yet, or is he throwing early this week? Or was it early this past week? I'm kind of getting my weeks crossed up.
I don't think he's throwing yet. I think he's about to throw.
Okay, so he's about to throw. Other than that, I mean, not a whole lot happening down there. Luis Isla pitched 9 innings for Margarita. Basically as a loogie. He threw 9 innings. I bet he pitched. Actually, I could just go to his profile. Yeah, he threw 9.1 innings in 14 appearances. ERA below 2, 7 strikeouts to 4 walks, WHIP of 0.64. He threw pretty well down there. On the other side of the ball, no one really of note.
Yeah, so on Eduardo Rodriguez, he threw for the first time yesterday, live BP. So
okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see. In Puerto Rico, a little interesting. Rusney Castillo played for Caguas, and his team actually not only won the Puerto Rican League, but also the Caribbean Series. He hit 392, 431, 451, and 51 at-bats for Caguas. Meanwhile, Christian Vasquez for Santurce hit 333, 320 with 2 home runs and 97 at-bats. Worth mentioning that Castillo didn't hit any home runs down there. I think it's kind of more of the same, basically. A lot of bad ball and play luck, frankly. And Joseph Monje hit 265, 294, 306 for Santurce as well as an outfielder. Otherwise, not a whole lot to report. Daniel McGrath was the only pitcher down in the Australian League, only player in the Australian League for the Red Sox. He had an ERA above 6. Didn't really throw all that great, but again, he kind of came in late in the year. I think it was more just kind of getting himself ready than anything. Otherwise, not really a whole lot to report on the Venezuelan development program. Kind of your stars of the show, so to speak, were old Marino Campana, who hit 315, 380, 427. I'm trying to think of who the kind of prospects down there were. Lorenzo Cedrola hit 360 for that club, but he's a little old for the league, frankly.
Isla actually pitched, but he's pretty old for the league too.
Yeah, well, he was. Yeah, I think it was just to get him warm. He pitched 3 innings.
Yeah, just 3 innings. Yeah,
Margarita's team in the league, so he just went down and got some quick work, and that happens. The teams will do that because those innings were all early in the year, but not a whole lot to report from down there. Frankly, there was no "oh my God, is Michael Almanzar actually for real?" like we had one year, which turned out to not be the case. So that's the fall winter leagues. Not a whole lot to report on there, but wanted to mention it. We kind of touched briefly on, you mentioned the Eduardo Rodriguez thing, but news from the Fort guys, not a whole lot really to report on from down there. Everyone's in the best shape of their lives, including Andrew Benintendi, who apparently put on the proverbial 15 pounds of muscle in the off season. I don't know if you guys are reading anything into that. I'm certainly not. I think it'll help him during the year to stay healthy more than anything. Rather than actually lead to a whole lot more power. What do you guys think, Ian?
Yeah, we kind of talked about last year. He's really small.
Yeah.
And even last year, you had to wonder, because it's such a grind, the major league season, that especially when he was probably like 180 pounds last year, maybe 170, how much was he going to wear down as the season? But that could definitely help him sustain the grind. But I don't think it's going to change anything. He's not going to go out there and hit like 30 home runs or anything. But I think it's just more like day-to-day maintenance, and consistency will be helped by that.
Yeah, and kind of the biggest story early in camp was that Blake Swihart had the yips, guys. Couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher, and it's now, go figure, fine. Anything there to that, Matt, or are you just kind of moving on already?
No, I'm moving on. I don't know. I guess the more interesting story with that is the whole catcher competition, and I don't know. I think I just saw a story this morning. Like, would it make sense to try Swihart at third? But it's kind of
no.
It's tough to just switch him into any position you need at the time. So that seems pretty risky to me to just keep moving him around. So I don't like that right now. But maybe, third is an idea I had long term for him down the line if catching doesn't work out. But I absolutely agree that he should. They should have stuck with him last year. That was a weird move when they put him in the outfield.
Yeah, it's interesting to me to have a club, and this maybe is touching a little bit more on the major league club than we need to, but where the starting catcher entering the year, there's a scenario where he's not even on the team anymore at the end of the year, and that's a good thing. Does that make sense?
So you're saying if like Sandy Leon struggles again and Swihart is going to actually hit?
If he turns back into a pumpkin, yeah.
Which he did for most of the second half last year.
Right. And I honestly don't think it's much of a catcher, quote, competition entering the year, because when you've got 3 guys, one of whom has options.
Yeah, no, it's not a competition. Sandy Leon and Vasquez are your 2 major league catchers to at least open the season. Yeah, I don't think there's any question.
And I think you have to at least start with Leon getting maybe 4 out of every 7 starts.
Oh, definitely, because you cannot put him in. He doesn't have the bat to play 4, 5, 6 days a week. I mean, as great as he is defensively, he'll hit like 210 with a 230 on base and like a 300 slugging if he was to play every day. Like, he just doesn't have the bat to sustain that position. And we say that, we always talk about how little hitting matters at the catcher position, blah, blah, blah. But you have to hit at least a little. And yeah, Vasquez, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's made some changes mechanically this year, but from what we've seen recently, the bat's just not there.
All right. Anything else? I mean, I guess we could mention the non-roster invites as far as prospects go. The interesting ones for me, obviously, we mentioned Sam Travis. I don't think that's surprising. I think it makes a whole lot of sense, especially when you consider that he's basically going to be the number 2 first baseman on the depth chart behind Mitch Moreland for much of camp, while Hanley Ramirez is gone for the World Baseball Classic. So that makes a lot of sense that he's up there. Some of the other non-roster invites from AAA don't really surprise me that much. Maybe I guess you can mention Chandler Shepard. Interesting, he's getting a non-roster invite. But the biggest one is obviously Rafael Devers. And to me, this really strikes me as hey, you might be up late in the year, but this is more about getting you exposed to Major League camp, getting you to see what Dustin Pedroia's daily workout is like, getting you to see how, guys like Mookie Betts and Jackie Bradley and Xander Bogaerts prepare themselves to play in a major league game, getting around these guys so that next year, when you maybe are a lot more of a consideration for the major league roster, what's expected of you going in. I personally think he's back in minor league camp by the time we get there. St. Patrick's Day weekend, guys. I don't know what you think, but that's how I read into that.
Yep, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I guess to throw out another, well, we already mentioned Kyle Kendrick. I was looking at Matt Dominguez is kind of interesting. He's a former first-round pick who's a non-roster invitee at third base, and he had a decent season last year. He has some power. He's been mostly at AAA and it never put together at the major leagues. He was mostly with Houston in the majors, but he could be someone who's somewhat interesting if they need some more third base depth.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the in case of emergency break glass option, right?
I think he's sort of the maybe slightly better version of Mike Holt.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we have Holt projected for Double-A right now, DHing.
Right, right.
Yeah, maybe Dominguez becomes a guy if he absolutely lights the world on fire. Last year, he got a brief cup of coffee in the majors, but he hit okay in AAA. I don't know.
Strong defensively, so
solid, true. Supposedly, yes, that's the reputation. I mean, personally, I would want to give Marco Hernandez some time before him, even. But
definitely.
Yeah,
I think also it seems like just breaking news. According to Evan Drellick, John Farrell likes Steve Selski, so maybe he's one to watch.
Yeah, have we heard anything yet about why on earth he's playing center field? He's a guy who's played, I think, 22 games in his career since being drafted in 2011 in center field.
I mean, if you look at it, they don't have depth at center field. So
true.
So it's like literally, if Chris Young goes down, because Holt doesn't play center. Holt only plays corner, so they don't have
center field. Remember, he's the one who bailed out Johnny Gomes a couple years back with that ridiculous catch in the field.
I don't think he played center field last year, though.
Well, no, they had a guy.
Well, no, I know, but if they need center field depth, I mean, who are they gonna? They don't have anyone in AAA who can play center field.
Betts could potentially move over.
Well, I think they would move Benintendi. Is what? They would
probably. But this is the time to try things out.
Yeah.
If you're gonna.
Oh, that's fine.
It doesn't hurt. Versatility's key because, Castillo is, as we said, not coming up, and Celsi's already on the 40. He's the only other outfielder other than Chris Young, and is Bryce Brent still on the 40?
Yes.
I think he has no options.
Wow. So they need someone to play who's going to have to play center field in AAA who's on the 40. So
last year Bradley played 155 games in center field. Benintendi got 3, Young got 3, and Castillo got 1. Ideally, you are not running Chris Young out in center field, and I think the presence of Benintendi means that you don't have to do that.
Yeah, but they do need someone at AAA with some center field experience, so I don't think it hurts to give it a shot.
I guess. I mean, they did that last year with Ryan Lamar, and all they did wind up using him for was one game in left field.
And he pitched. Don't slander Ryan Lamar's name. It's Michigan.
Fair point.
At least he's still playing unlike your UVA guys.
Hey, you know what? I've never claimed that UVA was the Major League star factory that you would think they would be, given how successful they've been in college. Anyway, all right. Well, let's move on. Just to close this out with some listener questions. Again, emails can go to podcast@soxprospects.com. We, appreciate all of your emails. We try and get to all of them eventually. So let's get through some questions, guys, shall we? Some of these might be horribly out of date because they're all almost 2 months old, if not older. First question comes from Sam from DC. He said, in the last podcast, you sounded like you were generally cool with the prospect haul given up for Chris Sale. Would you agree that it also lessens the sting of the Pomerantz-Espinoza trade if you look at it as a package deal? I hated to give up Espinoza, but I wouldn't have balked at a package of Kopech, Diaz, Basabe for Pomerantz, at which point Moncada and Espinoza for Sale seems like a trade most people would be fine with as well. Thoughts? I think it's interesting for him to say that. Let's start. I'll say this. I think that premise, it gets dangerous because then you're just picking and choosing which trades you're looking at as package deals, right? Do you also throw in the Tyler Thornburg trade and all of that? Let me put the question to you this way, guys. Would you have been okay with Kopech, Diaz, and Basabe for Pomerantz? Or perhaps maybe a little more realistically, let's just look at this. Would you have been okay with Kopech for Pomerantz, Ian?
Probably not. I mean, and I like Espinosa more than Kopech, but we talked about it. I'm not a fan of Pomerantz for many reasons, including the fact that he had thrown more than 130 innings in any year, and he had half a good season basically, and that I'm not giving up a top 20 prospect or a top 25 prospect for a guy who has had half a good season and has no track record of health or being able to sustain, 200 innings in a season.
Right.
That's kind of a tough one because it depends. Like if you're talking about their respective values at the trade deadline, I'd say yes. But if you're talking at like right now or in the off season, Kopech's value went up because of the AFL. Pomerantz's value went down because of the injury became known. So, if you're talking about right now, I would say probably not. Probably not, especially with, we're still not sure what's going on with his elbow. I would say no. But if we're talking about last trade deadline, I would say I would have definitely said yes at the trade deadline.
I guess it's tough to look back with the benefit of hindsight and know what you would have said, but that still seems like a lot to me. I mean, remember at the time, Kopech was... Well, how far was Kopech? Because, I actually had pointed out to me the other day just how good Kopech got in Salem. I mean, he was starting to move up lists in Salem. It wasn't like, I was kind of thinking of it as more of the AFL definitely did affect his prospect standing. I think he would have been more of a top 50 guy than a top 30 guy or top 25 guy. But, at the time of the trade deadline last year, and actually we may need to look at when the Pomerantz deal got made because that was early, right? That was, this is wonderful listening right now. Pomerantz. Okay, the Pomerantz deal happened on July 14th. And at that point, yeah, okay.
Kopech had only had 3 starts.
Yeah, he'd only had 3 starts. One was with Lowell, and he walked 4 guys in 4 1/3 innings. His first outing with Salem was 4 innings, 1 hit, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. And the next one he made before the trade was 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. So that was a good one.
That was like right when he started going on a run, so it was right at the beginning of his value going up.
Right. Although I saw him on July the 23rd at Frederick, and he looked okay 2 starts later. So, again,
it was like his worst. Well, one of his worst. Those 2 starts in a row were his worst 2 at Salem, basically.
Yeah, the Frederick one, and then the next one against Myrtle Beach, where he walked 5 and 4 1/3. So he was kind of out of whack control-wise, which one would think, starting the year off, you might be. But I don't know.
It really was such a small sample size with him. Looking back at it now.
Yeah, maybe we would have been okay with it at the time.
Yeah.
Like admitting that they were desperate,
Yeah. I mean, I think we were talking about him as a reliever really up until. Well, I mean, we still are to some degree.
Still kind of are, yeah.
But I think like we were more hard in that direction up until, especially the AFL. A lot of good press started coming out, but that was in shorter stints too.
Yeah.
But all the strikeouts towards the end of the season and getting the walks under control. But there were still big walk numbers. There's a few starts without walk numbers.
Well, he had the last 2. Well, and then his last 2 starts of the year were stingers. The playoff start and the last regular season start. I mean, the last regular season start, he didn't make it out of the first, and the playoff start, he went. I don't think he made it out of the third. So, yeah.
I mean, but that's who Kopech is going to be. Even if he is a starter, he could have like 6 good starts in a row, and then he's just going to blow up for 1. Because he just doesn't have the command or the consistency with his secondaries to, run it out every day and throw 6-7 solid innings.
At the risk of making... Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, at the risk of making a lot of people angry, is he the next Clay Buchholz?
I'm not going to say anything on that, but I don't hate it.
Right? I mean...
It's better stuff than Buchholz. He doesn't have as good a
Does he, though? I mean, he's got a better fastball, but when
fastball.
Buchholz came up, we were all in awe of his changeup and his curveball.
Well, that's what I said. Buckled secondary pitches are much better than Kopech's, at least when he was in the big leagues in his peak.
And his control was better.
But yeah, that's the thing. I don't want to get on like Kopech. He's not with the system anymore. He's out of our purview. So,
but he can throw like 105 miles an hour. So obviously he's better, of course.
True.
That's true.
It was actually 100. But
I actually
just not like backstep way of a good argument.
No, I actually did get asked because in a workout with the White Sox, or not with the White Sox, with his private trainer, there was a video of him hitting 109 on a gun, and people just heard that part of it, and so I got asked about him hitting 109, and I said yeah, but it was because it was with a light baseball and he took a crow hop. So I mean, that's high, but it's not telling us anything we didn't know.
I mean, Kopech has an 80 fastball. Like, everyone knows that, but it's just, the 105 talk is still one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Right, well, the fact that became like a national story. Like, I saw it on SportsCenter.
Right.
That like Michael Cope, like Red Sox prospects, hits 105 miles an hour.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, thank you for the question, Sam. I think we may disagree with
it. It is an interesting question.
It's an interesting thought exercise, yes. All right, our next question is from Mike, and he says, would a good topic for the podcast be the loss of good outfield prospects from the Red Sox minor system? Margot, Basabe. Only Benintendi is left with no good outfield prospects in the top 20 besides him. We still seem to have a plethora of quality infield prospects. Best regards, Mike Renier. Thank you for the question, Mike. I think we mentioned the lack of depth. As far as outfielders go, he is correct that right now there is no other outfielder in our top 20. We mentioned that Lorenzo Cedrola shows up in MLB.com's top 20, but the next outfielder on our list is Mike Matheny at 26, so I think we all kind of agree is probably a
Tate.
Or Tate. Did I say Mike Matheny? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Wow.
That's bad.
Yeah, Mike Matheny at 26, and I guess you should mention... God!
That's twice.
Tate! Matheny! At 26, Kyrie Washington at 28, and Yohan Ibar at 30. We'll mention all of them. Let's just give them all different first names while we're at it. Mike Matheny, George Washington, and Manny Ibar.
I was going to say Willie Ibar, isn't he? Or no, Eric Ibar is the...
Eric Ibar was the one I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, those are the three outfielders that we have ranked next, and they're all in the back half of the 21 to 30 range and have giant question marks. So, lack of depth, yes, but I think there's one key thing that you need to consider with this. Matt, do you know what I'm thinking?
I don't.
The fact that all three outfielders at the major league level are incredibly young and going to be around for at least
that's what I was going to say.
5 more years.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is just like looking at like the draft and international history, they really haven't drafted that many outfielders either who they've given money to. Like the guys they take in the outfield, like last year, the only guy they took in the top 20 rounds, they took 2 outfielders and they gave them each $10K. Mm-hmm. And like the 2015, they took Matheny and they gave him $500K in the 4th round. But other than that, Jerry Downs, who's a first baseman now, Nick Hamilton, who might be released. I don't know. I still have never seen him play, even though he's been in the system for 2 years.
I think he's been dinged up, but he was also a project. I mean, Nick Hamilton was a guy, basically a track star out of New York, who was committed to a JUCO, and they signed him out of high school for $100K.
Yeah,
and he's still in the GCL.
Jagger Rusconi is the second baseman now.
He was then too. I remember running into, I think I can say this, but I ran into Emil Sade, who's now in Arizona, at the park, and asked him after the draft, like, Rusconi's playing second base now, and he said, yeah, why? And it was like he was announced as a center fielder, and he was extremely surprised by that. So
I didn't know that. And then Danny Mars, back in 2014, but they just haven't taken that many outfielders. Yeah. And even in the international, I think weren't 2 of the guys they lost outfielders?
Albert Guimaro and Simon Mazzotti.
And those were the 2 highly regarded ones, I want to say.
And Guimaro immediately started catching with Miami.
Yeah. So I think it's just a kind of a quirky thing. I mean, it's not quirky. They just haven't had that many outfielders, and the ones they've tried to get in the system either haven't signed. Because, there's all the guys they drafted back, like the Ryan Bolt types. There were other, I think, outfielders who they could have given money to but didn't. Who's the guy I'm thinking of? Jaron Kendall is who I'm thinking of.
Who's going to be potential?
Probably
potential 1-1 this year.
Yeah, so they've drafted outfielders. They either haven't signed them or they've been taken away. So it's just, We
should mention the guys they haven't signed as well, by the way. Like Jaron Kendall, they drafted him in the 30th round in 2014, and he was a top 100 prospect during the year, and he was committed to Vanderbilt. He wasn't signing.
Yeah, true. And that was the year they didn't have any money. What was the year they left a bunch of money on the table? Was that 2013?
It was 2013 because that was the year they were going to try. No, that was the Jordan Sheffield year.
Yeah, and that was the Bolt year.
Yeah, I mean, Bolt was basically top guy insurance. I don't think he was ever really going to sign because he was another guy who was a top 100 draft prospect who they drafted in the 22nd round, and his draft stock had actually fallen because he broke his leg during his senior year. So they were going to have to give him top 15 money probably to sign him, and they couldn't have. They left $931,000 on the table, but that money was basically probably earmarked for Jordan Sheffield in the 13th round, and they couldn't get him to sign. And sure enough, was he a first rounder this year, second rounder?
Second rounder, I think, by the Dodgers.
So
I think, though, that part of it definitely is, we've talked about this before, but the new draft rules have really impacted their ability to sign this type of talent. And I think we're going to see it a lot. Like last year, they got lucky. They had that 12th pick. Or they didn't get lucky. They just were bad the year before. But like this year, they're going to be picking at the back of the first round and the back of every round. They don't have any extra picks.
I would say they did get lucky that Jason Groom fell to them.
That's true.
A player of that caliber.
That's true. So it's harder. You can't find those high school guys. That Mookie Betts type in the 5th round is not there anymore. Mm-hmm. So and the guys who are falling are because they're not signable. Like last year, for example, their 11th rounder, Nick Quintana. Like he fell. They took him in the 11th round. Under the old system, he signs guaranteed. Under the new system, they had $114K, so they could have offered him $214. There was no way he was signing for $214.
Right.
So it's like it's just a lot more difficult for them to. It's harder to bring talent into the system these days, and we're not even talking about the fact that they haven't signed any international guys last year.
Right.
So there's no either new international guys. So it's just the way the new MLB rules have really limited their ability to bring in that young upside type player, and we're starting to see that. Before this, we still had like the remnants of those past drafts and those past international periods, but now we're starting to see kind of those new rules going into effect, and we're seeing the depth really decrease.
Well, I should mention, by the way, Nick Quintana won Pac-10 Player of the Week in his first week as a college baseball player. I don't know if you guys saw that.
I did not. It's not. I mean, they've done a good job of drafting guys late in the new system. They just haven't been able to sign them, as the Jaron Kendall types or JJ Mitijevich. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's at Arizona also. It was pretty good.
Yep.
And as you said, Quintana, Sheffield, they've done a good job identifying Bolt. They've identified talent. It's just they just don't have the money to sign them anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Matt, you were about to jump in with something.
Well, I was just going to mention Danny Mars too. Some people like him. Keith Law actually has him at 16 in the system, which is very, very high.
That's true.
But
too.
He's an older guy who's closer to the majors. So and he played in Arizona Fall League, a speedy guy, that type of thing. So I don't know. I don't think we see a lot there right now, but he's a guy to keep an eye on as far as someone closer to the majors.
Well, he's athletic. I mean, he's an athletic kid who, if he puts it together, he played in the Arizona Fall League in large part because he missed a lot of the season with an injury. Just to kind of make up some at-bats.
He's someone who he actually was down at Instructs when I was there, and I was talking to a couple scouts about him. And we were like, so what do you think of Mars? It's like, I mean, nice prospect, but he doesn't have any power. And so what is he? I mean, at best case, he's a 5th outfielder, 4th outfielder. Because he's not a great center. I don't think he plays center field either.
He has, but just in a pinch.
But yeah, so he's a corner outfielder with no power, and he's already 23. So maybe it's a bench guy, but there's not, you're not looking at a potential, even a borderline starting outfield prospect there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Chris's comment about him not playing much this year, he actually played the most he's played in his career, 108 games. But when you look at his career, it's been all injury marred, 50 games a season pretty much.
Well, if you see him, he's a very thin guy. It's not a strong frame, or something that it's not surprising that he gets hurt, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
When you saw Salem last year and they would run out an outfield of Yosef Monhe, Danny Mars, and Brian Hudson, it was like the 350-pound outfield, practically.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating, but they were all very skinny.
The guy, Monhe's the one for me that I think he has a chance to take a step forward. He was out of Puerto Rico. He's still 21. He's still young.
I think he was a soccer player.
No, that was Henry Ramos.
Okay, maybe.
But he's someone who when I've seen him, he doesn't do anything great, but he's got a little more power than Mars. He can run. I think he plays center field also. And he's someone who I think could maybe take a step forward this year if things break right.
Yeah. We'll have to keep an eye on those guys. Thanks for the email, Mike, by the way. And we're going to have to speed it up, guys. We've got two more that I want to get to, and we're running way over per usual. This is from Steven Martano, the editor at Beyond the Box Score, actually, and he said, Dave Dombrowski has traded away at least 4 of Boston's top prospects. He actually sent this email the day of the sale trade, but I didn't see it because it wound up in my spam folder in my Yahoo email. So he said, knowing what you know now about the roster injuries, where they are on the winning curve, would you redo any of the earlier trades, presumably Dombrowski's? It's an interesting question to me, I think, because I think the one that this really bears on is the Kimbrel trade, primarily, because I think we would all undo the Pomerantz trade in a heartbeat, correct?
Yes.
But the Kimbrel trade to me is interesting. I still do not like the trade, but I will concede the following. One, the value and price of relievers has at least gone up, and I think Dombrowski may have either caused it by setting the market or saw it coming. I still think it was an overpay. I still don't think it's quite as high as people think it is, because the only other trades we have that we can compare the Kimbrel trade to are the Ken Giles trade, which I think, frankly, the Astros may have given up more for less in that case. And Wade Davis, tell me if I'm forgetting any trades, guys, but Wade Davis to the Cubs this past offseason, because I'm looking at closer trades during the offseason.
The Chapman trade, though, also.
But that was during the year, and I don't think you could compare that. I mean, maybe you can, but Wade,
I think you can, though.
Okay,
because he's his impact is so great, and he's such a high-end reliever that even if it's half a season, he can make. It's basically like you're changing your team, like kind of like with Kimbrel, like you're getting like that lockdown guy.
I guess. I mean, so then that was for Gleyber Torres, right?
And more. There was like 3 other guys.
And Torres is now one of the top. I mean, he's one of the top 5 prospects in baseball by pretty much consensus, right?
Yeah.
So that's huge. Wade Davis, who's injured, got traded for Jorge Soler, who's a major league ready young piece who could be pretty good. I don't think his star's fallen a little bit, but not too much. I mean, the value is clearly higher. I still think they gave up too much. I still am wondering where's the second piece that comes back, or if you needed to include either Logan Allen or Carlos Asuaje. I honestly, I would leave it intact as it is. I don't know about you guys. And I hate saying that because I don't love the trade, but would you guys redo any of the other trades that Dave Dombrowski has made other than the Pomerantz trade, which I feel like is obvious?
Matt, you want to go first?
Well, I agree with you on the Kimbrel trade. I think that Margot and Guerra I could live with. The other two included, it just seemed like too much. Maybe you have those two plus a lottery ticket, but I remember saying that at the time of the trade too. At least it was one player too many. Like, why do you have to include Logan Allen or even Asuaje? But yeah. So I agree with you on that one. I don't think I haven't had too much problem with most of his other trades. Like Thornburg, for instance, this offseason. Yep. Looking back on it, seems like kind of a lot for a guy who's not a closer. It's like three kind of young prospecty. Travis Shaw obviously isn't still a prospect, but I kind of like that trade in the way that it wasn't anyone with a high ceiling. I don't really think that they're guys who are going to make a big impact down the line. The type of guys who are replaceable. They look nice in the top prospect list, but in the end, I don't think they bring the kind of value that that you necessarily need for your team right at that time. That's going to put you over the top type of thing. Dubon could develop into a star, but we think of him more as a bench player. And the other guys, maybe Pennington is kind of the wild card, but yeah. So I kind of like that trade, even though it was three guys who seemed like a lot, kind of a lot for a reliever. When you add it all up, it's not really like the parts are good parts, but they're not sort of franchise changing or really something that's not replaceable. So I like how Dombrowski kind of is able to spin off some of the assets that are high valued at the time and look nice on the prospect sheet, but without giving up the really high end guys that we think project best to the majors. In trades like that, at least.
Yeah, and I agree with Chris. I think it was an overpay, but I would also do it, especially with I think part of the shift is kind of stemmed from this is how baseball is going, and it goes back, I think, to that Royals playoff run. What was that? 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Where
the one
all of a sudden,
all
of a sudden, it just people started realizing that come October, the bullpen is very, very important to your success, and you need guys who throw hard at the end of the game. And that offseason is when they went out and got Kimbrel, and basically you have. He identified the guy he wanted. He went out and got him. He was under contract already. And I think when you look at the contracts that were given to relievers this offseason also, you see what Chapman got, what Kenley Jansen got. Those guys got what? I think 5 years, $90 million apiece, I want to say. 5 years, $80 million, something like that. It's just the price of relievers just across the board has gone up. So even though I think it was an overpay at the time, it seems to have maybe, as you alluded to, might have shifted the market a little bit in trade negotiations. But also, he identified the guy he wanted, went out and got him, and there just aren't that many, high-end closers that are available each year. And so when there is one, I guess you just have to go out and get them. And also in regards to what Matt was saying, I think it's pretty interesting too. I think Dombrowski's done a good job of trading guys at their peak value. Matt alluded to it more of like the guys who look good on prospect list and the build the depth, but might not necessarily be impact players. Like guys like Dubon, even Kopech, who they've traded, and Guerra, he's traded them like at their peak value, I would say, trade wise. And I think that's something that I commend them for, is that, you identify the guys that you want to keep in your system, i.e. Benintendi and Devers. And then you trade if the guy is someone that you like, but he's got a lot of value, Moncada, you trade him, and even Kopech. And then there's the other guys like Dubon, Guerra, who had really good years. Some scouts really like them. And if you find the right team, that guy is worth a lot more to them than they potentially are to you. And I think in both Guerra and Dubon's case, that was kind of what happened. Like Guerra had no future with the Red Sox with Bogarts at shortstop. And so you found a team that really valued him. And Dubon, I don't see where he would play for the Red Sox either, especially since they have Brock Holt in that super utility role. They have Marco Hernandez, and they don't like really developing guys for bench roles. Versus a team like Milwaukee, we've said second division, starter potential. That's team like Milwaukee fits that profile perfectly. And so he probably was worth more to Milwaukee than he was to the Red Sox. So I think he's done a good job in dealing guys like that to teams that value them more than maybe the Red Sox do.
Right. Well, thanks for the question, Steve. We got to move on, guys. So that ends our email bag. Again, podcast at soxprospects.com. I'm in spring training mode this week. Send those in. We'll get to your questions. We're probably going to do at least one more before we head down to the Ford, if not two. So probably one. Who am I kidding? It's probably going to be one more. So thank you to everyone who sent in emails. One thing we did want to get to that we reported the story that speaking of international free agents, former international amateur free agents, Christopher Acosta is back in camp with the Red Sox. He is in the Dominican at the Dominican Academy, working out with his fellow teammates down there. And that's all we know. That's the extent of it. We kind of talked about this a little bit, guys, and I think it's a matter of we need to see him pitch before we move him up. We've been provisionally ranking him first at number 40 and then at number 60 just for the sake of if none of this off-field stuff had happened. We talked about it before, but just a really quick recap. Last year, during extended spring training, had some kind of disciplinary issue, got sent back to the Dominican Summer League, but basically got on a plane to the Dominican, without permission, I think is what happened first. Never reported to the Dominican Summer League team like they asked him to, and we didn't really know anything from there. He, as far as we know, hasn't been pitching or anything or working out, and he's returned to at least workouts with the club down in the Dominican. That's about it. I guess, Ian, you're the one who brought this up. Any thoughts on the return, at least for now, of Chris Acosta to camp?
Yeah, I mean, when we saw him, I seen him at spring training. He was someone who intrigued us, and that's why we moved him up into the top 20. And he's got that repertoire. I think he was the top Dominican pitcher back in the 2014 signing period.
He was.
So there was. I mean, they clearly liked what they saw, at least when he was an amateur, and identified him as a potential big time talent. If you're going to give a guy $1.5 million as a 16-year-old, but now it'll be almost 2 years since he's pitched in a game, and just you got to wait and see. I need to see him. I'll believe it when I see him stateside throwing. Basically, it's one of those things.
In the current system, though, you'd think he's a guy who could move, even close to the top 10-ish because of, how many people have left since then. But obviously, it's a long, we have to see something before he gets up there. But it's intriguing with the way the system's at right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can't really forget about the fact that he literally just kind of left the team.
Right.
That definitely says something about makeup issues.
For a whole season too. It wasn't like a month or something.
Yeah, he missed the season of development. I think our best guess is that he hasn't been working out, and I think we'll leave it at that. It's just a very interesting situation, but you're right. It's very easy to see the universe in which Christopher Acosta stays in camp last year and continues a progression. It's very easy to see a situation where he is now a top 10 prospect in the system, especially given their lack of starting pitching depth, which we've talked about.
Well, yeah, and I think it's point of reference. Like guy like Brian Mata, we have in the top 20, and Darwinson Hernandez, we have in the top 30. And Acosta was more highly regarded than both of them. Mm-hmm. And I want to say when I saw him, he was like similar as like low 90s fastball, like big curveball. Like he showed some interesting stuff, and he had a great pitcher's frame. And we have those guys like pretty high up, so he would definitely be someone who would be highly regarded if he had stuck with it last year.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, let's wrap this up. We're already soups long. Thank you everyone for downloading. Again, check us out on Twitter at Sox Prospects, at SP Chris Hatfield, at Ian Kundle with 2 L's, at Matt Hegel, MATHUEGEL. I think I got all of those right. Thanks to Mike Matheny for this podcast, and Eric Ibar and George Washington. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon, hopefully within a week or two. Until then, keep reading, keep watching, and thanks.